Romans 8:32. He who did not, there's past tense, did not spare his own Son, but, another past tense, delivered him up for us all. And now notice the logical shift. How will He not also with Him freely give us all things? Now that's a rhetorical question. Whenever you have a rhetorical question in the Bible that doesn't have an answer after it, you got to supply the answer. And when you supply the answer, you can turn the rhetorical question into a statement. Right? So what would the statement be? The statement would be, surely, since God did not spare His own Son, but delivered Him up for us all, He will most certainly give us all things with Him. That's the logic there. The logic of heaven. Because He died in the past, because Christ died in the past, He provided a foundation that makes God's commitment to all who are in Him for the future absolutely certain. Omnipotent grace is on my side forever because of the past work of Jesus. If I'm united to Christ, I may have complete certainty that everything God is, He is for me from now until eternity because of the past work. And the logic is called an a fortiori, right? I don't know if I can explain what an a fortiori argument is. It's from the greater to the lesser. If this happened, surely that will happen. And here, this is the astonishing thing, God's providing me with everything I need in the future is a piece of cake if He gave me His Son to death. In other words, I remember Dan Fuller used to draw on I think they had still green boards, not whiteboards back then. He drew a big mountain and then a long hill, and he had a train. The train was my life, and it was just loaded down with sin. And there was no way it could get to heaven. And there's this huge mountain of God's wrath and my sin. And in my little train. And the cross, the work of God in bearing my wrath in Christ and providing my righteousness in Christ and covering my sin in Christ, pulled me to the top of the biggest obstacle between me and heaven. And then He drew the train going downhill on this side and said, you're just highballing it to heaven when you're on this side of the cross. And that's the logic of this verse. If He did the absolutely hardest thing imaginable, namely take the second person of the Trinity, bring that person into human flesh, appoint that person would be slandered and spit upon and beaten and crowned with thorns and have nails driven through His hands and die the most ignominious and the most painful death for sinners like me. It's a piece of cake to get me to heaven after that. That's the logic. And therefore, when I say that faith in future grace is resting on a massive foundation, that's the way your mind must work. When you look to the future and you start to wonder, how can I count on the arrival of future grace to provide all that I need to do God's will? You do turn around and look back. You say, there's the reason. Christ crucified. And you rehearse the logic of this verse. I think that's probably my favorite verse in all the Bible.